Welcome to the MAM Journals. Some of you will recall, because you've been kind enough to watch, that I've actually done a couple of videos on either a bike like this or this particular bike. Earlier in the year I did a MAM journal on the Eddie Lawson replicas, and a friend of mine had lent me his version of this bike, and I enjoyed it so much and thought so highly of it that I went off and found one. So the second video, and the details for both of these are in the sections below, I just went round the bike and talked about the things that I was going to get done. So the third video, is about how did I get on getting the work done and making the various changes that I wanted to make on this bike, because I wanted to get as close back to original as I could. It's been good fun doing it, and when I buy a bike, when I try, particularly a bike that's had a previous owner and I'm not really familiar with, I try and get on any Facebook groups or associations so that I can try and learn a bit more from people who've actually already had the experience and benefit of running them and know a lot about them. And I also try and find someone who's particularly skilled at working on the bikes, because I like to, in that first instance, get everything checked over so that I know where I am with the bike, and then have the confidence later on to start taking more responsibility myself for ongoing maintenance once I know that we're on an even keel. What I'm going to do today is just go through what happened, where I took it, and how it worked out. I actually went to a face group meeting at a local cafe and met some very experienced and expert owners, and it certainly seems that there's a lot of people out there who own these who really do know every nut and bolt. There's another group of owners who enjoy the bike but haven't thought too much about what's going on, and there's another group of people who might find this video of interest, those that are thinking about getting one but just would like to know a bit more. But I hope all groups do get something from this video. Speaking to the experts, I thought one of the names that kept coming up when I mentioned this bike or talked about it in terms of somebody to take it to was a company based at Slough called PDQ, and the owner there, Larry Webb. And I thought, okay, that sounds for me. Slough's not too far away. I'm in Oxfordshire, and I thought, okay, that's a good place to start, and I'll take it down. So I popped down to see them. And indeed, I was amused to see, as I rode in, a car park full of ZRXs, which gave me some comfort that I'd come to the right place. So what did I actually ask them to do in relation to it? First, Larry said, well, have you got any problems? I said, I'm a bit nervous about the fact it's been effectively stood for a couple of years. I'm not sure whether the carburetors need ultrasonicking or whether you think they're okay. I'm not sure whether the power producing is right. It's got K&N filters in it. And the front end, to me, felt a bit soggy. So he asked me straight away, I was like, well, what do you weigh? And 13 stone is the answer. And he said, well, I'll check the spring rate when I do it. So he started, the major thing that I'd just like to talk through that he did, is he actually took the forks completely apart. And I know when we talk about servicing, often people say, well, have you changed your fork oil? But he really did a very thorough job, which I took some comfort from, and literally dismantled them. And he said, well, I'm not surprised you're struggling a bit, because the fluid in it, the fork fluid, is like mud. And secondly, your spring is a bit laboured, and you probably could do with just upgrading the springs. So that was the first thing that we went ahead and did. And he also took the tubes out and gave them a buffing to make sure that they were right, and he was happy with them. And then, again, attention to detail, which I enjoy, he then reassembled them all and left me very clear notes about exactly what the settings was, what the sag he'd been put in, how much fluid, what the air gap was, and how many clicks he had on both the rebound and the compression. So I was impressed with a nice job they did on that. The second main area that I'd asked him to look at is obviously the engine. I wanted to clearly make sure the valve clearances were okay, that we put new oil and filter in, that we changed all the coolant, and made sure that the carburetors were working in tune. And As you can see by the power graphs, when it was tested, which are clearly on the screen now, you can see that the bike produced 107 brake horsepower, and that was in line with his expectations. The factory numbers on this bike is that it produces 122 brake horsepower, but clearly that's at the crank, and I use a simple rule of thumb in so much as I always go, well, if it's a chain, it's probably lost 10% by the time it's got to the back, and if it's shaft, it's probably lost 15%. So those sort of numbers you'd expect to be about 107, 109, and he said, no, the bike's performing perfectly in line. And actually, although I'd said to him, well, put a plain filter back in, factory filter, don't worry about the K&Ns, he tested it with both and said, you're fine with the K&Ns, we've cleaned them up and left them in. So that was an easy issue. And I was very pleased that the test that he put in, by putting it on the rolling road, he said the carbs are functioning perfectly well, it's pulling nice and cleanly, and there's no need to ultrasonic them, which was good news as far as I'm concerned. Valves were fine. And then, of course, the thing that almost every forum that I'm in, or group that I'm part of, ends up talking about the starter chain tensioner. And my clutch basket had the nicks on that you associate with that failure of the tensioner to come across sufficiently out the way, and had caught it. So the well-known solutions are, of course, what's the quick fit, and there's plenty of videos on there for those quick tensioners and do it. And we decided that we'll do that, and we put it on. But the other thing, which is perhaps more interesting to some who may not be aware of this, is there's actually a smaller cogs and a more heavy-duty chain available from Kawasaki. And Larry picked that up in his research, and we decided to put that on as well, which again just keeps that tensioner away from the edge of the clutch basket. So naturally, with the nature of the clutch, one thing Larry said, and I thought, yeah, it's absolutely right. He said, I rarely see problems with these when people don't pull the clutch in when they start the bike, because obviously the action of doing that is pushing as you release the tension on the plates, it pushes the basket out nearer to the tensioner. So I've come from old school. I've always believed that a green neutral light is at best a guess and possibly a warning. So therefore, for years, I just pull the clutch in on every bike that I get him in and do it. And of course, that would make it more likely to catch. But I'm very pleased with the solution. It's a belt and braces approach. I said, let's do both, and seems to have worked, and it's a nice, neat, tidy job. Other things that I wanted to do when I bought the bike is it had a givey rack on, and I've got other bikes which have got the capability to carry luggage or anything that I require. So I really wanted to go back to the original look. Unfortunately, I bought this from a very nice guy in the Birmingham area, and he'd had the bike from new, and he'd put the givey wrap on, but he'd taken the time to package up the handles properly, and so it was really just a case of unbolting it and putting it back in. So that made that particular part easier. I also took off the crash bars. And interestingly, in one of the previous videos, somebody mentioned that they thought they weren't Kawasaki, they might be Rentec. But I'm not entirely sure, but I was grateful for the input. But I did want to take them out. And again, one of the advantages of buying from a fastidious previous owner is as I took them off, obviously the size of bolt that you require, because it no longer has it in, it's a shorter bolt. The original bolt that mounts the engine is shorter. And actually, interestingly enough, they're no longer available from Kawasaki. So I'm particularly grateful that previous owner did actually keep it, wrap it all up properly and protect it, and it just slotted in, and I could just put the crash bars on the rack there for later if I ever need them. I'm very conscious that every Facebook group that I'm in, there's always running jokes about tyres and oil, and I do get the joke, but I'm conscious that some people actually do want to know. So when I got the bike, the tyres were not worn out, but certainly very old, and they'd gone very solid. So I did want to change them, and I put some Michelin Road 5s on, and I've been pleased with it. I haven't particularly pushed it hard. You can probably see by the photographs of it, I'm hardly pushing it, but I'll get more confident with that next year, and I'll probably halve that chicken strip on the side. But I'm not a particularly fast rider. I don't need to get right over the edges. The only time I ever do is on the occasional time I'll do a road track. So most of the time on the road I like a little bit in hand. In terms of oil, I went for the Motul, and it's not because I particularly think it's the best oil or anything of that nature, but as you can probably aware, I've got quite a few bikes, and one thing I do want to do is end up with all the bikes using the same oil wherever possible, and it just enables me to sort of top them up, because most people say that I speak to professionally about this stuff, they say that most of the oils are pretty good, but don't mix and match. It's not a great idea. They've all got different additives in, and you are better keeping to the same ones. And I have to say, I've been very pleased with the Motul. I put it both in this and in my Kawasaki Z900RS, and the gear change has been much smoother on both occasions after changing the oil. So that's given me an encouraging sign that I've made the right choice on that, but other good oils are available. One thing I haven't yet got around to, but I mentioned in my video, is that there's some damage on the front fairing, this little bikini fairing there, and you can see some tape round it marking it, and I thought that'd be one of the earlier things I did. I'll just take it off, pop it down and buy some new stickers. Unfortunately, when you get to older bikes, this is a 2008 registered bike, a 2007 model, some of the things are no longer available. So in fairness, you cannot get the side stickers anymore, so I will be taking that off this winter, and I've found somebody who can actually make me up some copies. So I'll be getting the fairing painted and the copy transfers put on. So what do I think now that I've had the bike done? Well, I have to say I thought I was pleased with the bike anyway. I thought it was nice. It's a traditional Kawasaki muscle bike, but with modern performance really. I had before this bike, and I had a Z1000 A1, a 1977 bike, and I did find myself trying to ride it slightly faster than it really wanted to go. And the performance of this bike is really what I hoped the Z1000 would be, but memory plays tricks with your minds about how fast they are. So this is a bike. This bike, as most of you will know, is quite powerful. It's capable of actually doing 147. I've done nothing like that on it, but it does feel like a bike that could. So I can ride this bike the way that I want to ride a traditional Z muscle bike and enjoy it. The handling is what you'd expect of a bike of this sort of style. It's not fantastic, but it's perfectly adequate. Some people say if they push them hard and take them on tracks, the brakes could be better. I don't push my bikes that hard, so I certainly find the brakes are fine. The improvements on the front suspension and the front forks, the travel downwards, have been a big step forward, and I'm very impressed and pleased with the work that PDQ did on those for me. Because it definitely, as you come into a roundabout, I was waiting quite a long time to come back before I could tip in, but it's actually made a big difference, and it's the nice setup now for the sag of the bike, very comfortable bike to ride. I would say my only observations, if you like, was I still keep looking for sixth gear, but I guess we all do, but it's not really a criticism, it's just a characteristic of the bike. But I'm very pleased with it, and I think if you've got one of these bikes, you already know how good they are, and I'm saying I agree with you. And if you haven't got one yet, then I am commending it to you. I've had a great journey with it. I've actually done 750 miles on it in my first few months of ownership. I bought it in August, and I've done about 8,000 miles this year on various bikes. So it's had probably more than its fair share of riding, because some of the bikes only literally do a couple hundred miles a year on. So I am liking it, I am enjoying it, and it's a very good bike. So I hope you've found what I've covered today useful, and in the meanwhile, ride safe, stay well.